I am Amy Listischen-Burke, and I am Vice President of Industry Solutions for the Consumer Brands Association. We're excited you have joined us for today's Industry Insights session. Consumers say they care about environmentally and socially responsible products. What do their wallets say? This series provides overview of broad topics that are top of mind for CPG professionals. I have a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone's line was muted upon entry to reduce background noise. If you have a question during today's session, we will share contact information for our speakers at the end of the presentation. We encourage you to reach out to them directly. With that, let's dive into today's session. When it comes to buying environmentally and socially responsible products, many consumers are backing their words with actions. A recent study examines whether products that claim to be environmentally and socially responsible generate higher sales growth than products that don't. I'm excited to be joined by co-authors of that study to give us a sneak peek of the report that will be published this month. Jordan Barham, partner, and Steve Noble, senior partner with McKinsey and Company, and Sherry Fry, vice president, Total Wellness, NielsenIQ. Jordan, Steve, and Sherry, thanks for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. We're going to start with wishing you a happy Groundhog's Day, although apparently Puxatawny Phil has seen his shadow and we'll have another 6 weeks of winter. So I guess in the eye of the beholder, how happy a day it in fact is as I sit here in Minneapolis. Amy did a really nice job on the intros. So Jordan and I and Vineet, who led our data science team, partnered with Sherry from NielsenIQ to do what we think is a pretty groundbreaking analysis. We looked at about 500,000 products, 400 billion in sales, 32 different super categories to really understand and dive into insights about what consumers actually do, where they spend their dollars when it comes to sustainable products. This is a sneak peek, and so we're excited to walk you through an overview of some of the findings, the details of which will be released shortly and made available to everybody here. So with that, if you may bring the slides up, James. We'll flip to page 3, if you don't mind. I'm going to do just a little bit of context setting on how we think about this particular piece of work and then an overview of the study we did. And then Jordan and Sherry will take us through several of the insights that came out of it. As we think about sustainability, we kind of think of it in 3 different lanes. I'll talk about the left side and the right sides of this page first. You know, there's the protect the business lane, right? Think of that as playing defense. There's regulatory requirements, there's investor requirements, right? So there's a protect the business view. That's not what today is about. There's a collaboration view, right? Many of the things that you're all facing, scope 3 is a good example. You've got to collaborate and partner up and down your supply chain, in some cases with others you're competing against towards the greater good of sustainability. That also, while important, is not today's focus. What we're focused on today is the middle of the page. And we think of it as how do you go on offense in terms of sustainability and really differentiate. So this is all about consumer insights and how you can use those insights to both deliver on your sustainability commitments and to drive business performance. So that's what we're going to dive into today. Next page, please. Amy referenced a little bit of this in her opening remarks, but one of the challenges and perhaps conundrums faced by the sector is, on one hand, right, we've got investors and regulators and employees that have expectations for what all of us as company leaders are doing around sustainability. On the flip side, we've heard lots of executives and lots of companies tell stories about as they've introduced green products and sustainable products, the business case not always penciling out, the demand not always being there. In other words, right, we see, or here at least, there's a disconnect sometimes between what consumers say they will do when it comes to sustainable products and then what they actually do when they're standing at the shelf or browsing a website. And so this research is all about helping us make the case for both doing good through sustainable actions, but also doing good business through finding sources of demand for those products. Next page, please. So this is just a snapshot of the study that we did, and I'll maybe hit just a couple of points on what it is and then what it isn't, and then I'll pass it on to Sherry to take us into a few more details. I mentioned up front that the size of the study covered 30 plus categories, over 500,000 products. What it did is it looked at the attributes claimed, the sustainable attributes that were claimed on either the label or the packaging of those products, and said, how did those products perform in terms of sales growth relative to similar products that did not have those same claims? Sherry's going to take us through details on the types of claims that we included in this analysis. But that was the idea, right? It looked at the performance of products that claimed to have sustainable attributes versus similar products that did not. It did control for things like the size of the brand, the price tier of the brand, the category that product sat in. So it did control for a number of things. Two things it did not do, right? One, it did not imply or prove a causal relationship. So you can imagine there's a lot of factors that are hard to assess and control for. The brand, the marketing behind a brand, the distribution channels and footprint of a brand. So it's not fully causal, but we are quite confident given the size of the data and the analysis done that it is insightful in terms of where consumers are in fact spending. The second thing that it did not do, there was no assessment of the veracity or effectiveness of the claims being made. Right, so we didn't go and double check or prove that the company was actually living up to those claims. We took that at face value. That's obviously a very important thing. There's been stories around greenwashing and companies that are implying they're doing something that perhaps they're not. And so certainly we don't condone that. The study was not intended to get into that. It's rather saying if you take at face value the claims that are made, how do those products perform? So with that, let me pass it to Sherry for any additional comments on this page, and then certainly to take us into details on the types of claims and data that we used for the study.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. On the next slide, we just want to walk you through a little bit of the pillars. And first of all, I do want to say we were just thrilled to collaborate with McKinsey and Company on this research. We're really excited about what it is. We think it answers the question that we both of our organizations are consistently getting from clients, which is, help us build out the business case. Is there a business case? Help us understand this better. And as Jordan will walk you through, I mean, there are places where we had some hypotheses where we were proven wrong and some hypotheses where it really validated what we had been thinking. But, you know, one of the big things that we have seen is that there's just been an explosion of claims around sustainability across the store. And in this research, as Steve said, you know, we looked at 93 claims, you know, across the total store. And, you know, frankly, the word sustainability, you know, we just released some global research at NielsenIQ in December, where we were asking consumers, you know, what does sustainability mean? And it's really varied across the globe. You know, there's a lot of alignment that the environmental components, you know, pollution, protection of resources, but then there's really unique nuances of this growing area around social responsibility. And so we think it was really important in this research that we didn't lump it all together, but we broke out the pillars of animal welfare, environmental sustainability. We actually broke out organic and plant-based, as well as I said, the social and packaging, you know, keeping all of these pillars separate because, and then being able to look at them as an aggregate, we felt was really important to help really understand what's driving the growth and what's driving the opportunities across the categories. So this is just an example of the claims. Even since we just completed the research, we continue to add new claims. We see new claims popping up every day. You know, a lot of the claims that we're seeing growth in are areas around carbon and water and energy. So this is, as Jordan and Vineet and Steve and I have said, just the beginning of ongoing research, we think, for the industry. With that, Jordan, I'd love to have you start us off.
Great. Thank you, Sherry. You can go to the next page. We were guided by really three macro questions. So, you know, we tell you all the time, consumers care about sustainability and sustainable brands, but we don't, up to now, haven't given you a ton more information than that. And as we said, this can often be a frustration where manufacturers will launch products and not see the impact that they were expecting. So we start with just, you know, are we seeing, you know, in general, do products with ESG-related claims, you know, generate greater growth in those products without claims. And so we'll look at that, both at a very aggregate level and start to break it down into those categories. Then from there, which types of products and brands with, are able to differentiate and drive differentiated growth, and what's, resonating most with consumers. Is it only the small challenger brands? Is it only the big national brands with certain reach and scale? And then finally, we'll go into, and Sherry will lead us through, which types of the claims themselves that are resonating, because it is a really kind of complex mosaic of different attributes that have, we find more and less resonance across different categories. So starting at the 100,000 foot level, looking at, the entire almost, $500 billion in spend from 2018 to 2022, we did find that products with claims did grow faster than those products without claims. And it was about 170 basis points. If you're on the left-hand side, products with claims grew 170 basis points faster over that time period than those without claims. And which that's about 28% cumulative growth over that 5-year period versus 20% for products that made no such claims. And as we'll see later, there's something around, sometimes products with more claims even grew even faster. We're just looking at products with at least one claim. If we then look on the right-hand side of this, kind of what did that mean for the total market? Back in 2018, products with claims were around 47% of the market. And because of that outsized growth, they're actually to drive 55.5% of the retail sales growth between 18 and 22, which is is quite meaningful. If we go to the next page, the issue is that it's not that helpful for you as to think about it just in the aggregate of all 32 super categories. And I think this is where it gets quite important with what do you do with this? When we start to look at this at a category level, we see that there's pretty stark differences, both in terms of the prevalence of claims, which is percent of retail sales from products with at least one claim, and then the differential growth between products with claims versus those without. And this is where I think this, how sustainability does become a differentiator and help drive differentiated performance, becomes a bit of a surgical exercise to really understand, how is this playing out at my category level? And then again, what are the attributes that resonate with consumers at my category level? And then how do I shape my portfolio in favor of this? So as I said, the bubble chart represents the overall performance at a total category for these 32 categories that we examined. The horizontal axis is the prevalence of claims. So as an example, in cereal and granola, about 85% of the sales were coming from products that had at least one claim, versus in fully cooked meat, where it was, only about between 16 and 20%, right? So that's how to read this chart. And then the y-axis is that differential growth. And so we see that, for a category like fully cooked meat, with only 20% of the products associated with a claim grew on average about 5% more per year than the 80% of products, fully cooked meat products with no claim. By contrast, in cereal and granola, though 85% of products, have claims, those with claims grew at about 2% less per year than products without any claims. And to Steve's point, there's, we have the ability to go much deeper on each of those categories to understand why. And there's other dynamics from some of the challenger brands that were taking share, may not be making claims because it's kind of baked into their brand. So they're not using on-pack claims. Or there were certain elements over these years when, supply chain scale and availability were the things that were driving. So there's a lot of nuance underneath. But I think the important thing is to understand that you can't look at a total consumer, total grocery view. You really do have to dig in, at the category level to understand the dynamics. If you want to go to the next page.
Yeah, Jordan, I would just chime in on this one. It's a question that we often get, right? Is, well, how does it play out for my category or my sets of categories? In this overview today, we're not going to dive into each of these. You can imagine we could have a robust discussion on any one bubble on this chart. You'll see a bit more of that detail We'll share a few anecdotes today, but you'll see a bit more of that detail in the report that comes out. And then there is data and insight behind all of this for individual categories, which we're happy to get into, obviously, in smaller forms. But it is a really important point. And when I look at this, you just see the degree of difference is pretty stark, right? So from some categories that are 15, 20% overperformance to others that are 5 or 10% underperformance for these attributes. And so it does really make a difference if you dig into category details that this chart alludes to.
And in aggregate, right, 20 of the 32, or about 2/3 of the categories, showed positive growth differentials for products with claims at a category level, right? And those that didn't, I think we still absolutely see brands with claims that outgrew those without. And the questions become, hey, is there an opportunity? Has the right formulation and proposition not yet been created that resonates with consumers? And so that's a big opportunity, because we are seeing such a big part of the wallet that is going towards these products with sustainability claims attached to them. So I think that begins to get the mind thinking about ways to shape the portfolio to act on this information. So then we start to look at, what are the types of products with ESG related claims that are resonating most with consumers? And a lot of the concern here was, is this just the challenger brands? Is this just the big brands? How does this play out by size? What's happening with private label? And is this an area that where sustainability is being claimed by brands telling a purpose story? And so, that's what this next set of analyses go into. So if we go to the next page, what we found is that both large and small brands were able to drive differentiated growth. And so what we did is, to drill deeper behind the nuances, we started classifying the brands by type. So started out, store brands versus national brands. And then we further broke the national brands into 4 groups. So the large brands were the top 60% of dollar sales. Then the next 20% were medium, the next 15% is small, and the bottom 5% as the smallest brands. And our ingoing hypothesis, to Sherry's point about, hypothesis that got upended and were counterintuitive at first, was that national brands were going to lead the way. But in fact, we found that there's actually very strong growth affiliated with private label, and private label store brands have done a really have done a really effective job of attaching claims to products and driving differentiated growth over this time. So this is we saw private label outgrowing private label products with sustainability claims outgrowing their private label peers without sustainability claims in 88% of the categories that we looked at. So a really interesting question around who is going to drive the agenda on what, on sustainability in the years to come, and whether we see, private label players actually a bit out ahead on some of these things. Within large brands, we saw it was 50% of the categories saw that, large brands with sustainability claims outgrowing their peers without sustainability claims. And then it was, at the other end of it, almost 60% of the smallest brands were able to do so, which I think was kind of intuitive to us, right? We did think a lot of the challenger brands that are the smallest, do have sustainability often baked into the brand promise early on from the beginning, and so using that as a way to build their brand. And then at the bottom, in terms of who was doing it effectively, were the medium brands, were a little less than 40% of the categories saw medium brands with sustainability outgrowing those without. Do you want to go to the next page? The good news is, of the 32 categories that we looked at, 16 of those saw large brands using sustainability to outgrow other large brands that didn't have sustainability claims in place. And we have some examples of those categories. And what this chart just tells you to orient is that, overall in the category, do we see products with sustainability claims growing faster than those without? And then within the category, how did we see large brands performing? And we saw 14 categories where both the category overall saw sustainability outgrowing, and large brands were able to do so. There were 6 categories where the overall category did see sustainability outgrowing products without sustainability attached to them, but large brands have not been able to take advantage of that. And then we saw 2 categories where we didn't see sustainably labeled products outgrowing the category, yet there were large brands who were able to kind of counteract that story and able actually to achieve outsized growth. And then the 10 at the bottom where yet nobody, sustainability does not seem to be cracking the code and yet resonating with consumers. Which again, especially for those companies that have, play across multiple categories, this is not something where you can take a, really broad brush approach to how you do sustainability across your entire portfolio. You really do have to line up, the categories with the proposition with the consumer to really, authentically resonate and drive out performance. Lastly, because, one thing we had concern about was, is this only the domain of kind of premium price products? And so we did break this out in addition to size, looking at it by price quartile. And so, what we did see is that products with claims are associated with outsized growth across the price tiers. In every one of the price tiers we looked at, we saw, products with claims did outgrow. In the it was actually quite high in that first and second quartile pricing. So more premium, had the 60, almost 60% of the category saw products with sustainability outgrowing those without. And then on the other side, the lowest prices, which often was associated with the store brands, where we saw 63% of the categories show products with sustainability outgrowing those products without. So this is not just the domain of premium priced and premium tier products. This is something that we see resonating across price tiers. And again, speaks to the importance of bringing kind of nuance in that surgical approach to your portfolio.
Jordan, one thing to add to that we've kind of been watching even since we completed this research is that we're often asked, is there a price premium, right? We know that the sustainability requires a lot of big investments for your brands. And so what is the price premium we can get? And I'll talk a little bit about how, we kind of think maybe the reframing that question into a loyalty in the next section is kind of maybe the more opportunity. But one of the things that we are seeing is that we're actually, with inflation, with rising prices, we are seeing that consumers don't seem to be trading out of sustainable brands, sustainable products as much as other wellness characteristics where we're seeing some declines, which indicates that, there's a little bit more inelasticity when you also have sustainable brands as well. So just a little bit of an add to some additional things we're seeing around that pricing component.
No, you're right. And we did see, premiumness in price when we control for all other factors and see on average, there's about a 16% premium for products with sustainability. And that's, that's an average of averages. So, can be broad ranges from 10% in some categories to 30, 40% in other categories. But I think what we've learned is that you can't just make a claim and then expect to get that premium. There is truly something to the authenticity and the resonance with the consumer. That there has to be just a cohesive proposition involved in order for you to, one, earn the trust of the consumer and therefore, earn that premium. But when you do achieve that, consumers do reward that and they are demonstrating that with their spend.
And let me just add one small point here that we saw this through the use of NielsenIQ's panel, that the sustainable products are growing among a broad set of demographics. It's not just high-income consumers or millennials. It's really, there's variances across demographics, but it's much broader, right? So it suggests that sustainability has reached a kind of a mainstream maturing in the U.S. market.
Great.
Vineet, that's a great point. And in fact, one of the things that we've been looking at is what does the future look like? And when we looked even at some of the youngest consumers, the Gen Z, et cetera, we find that there's so many more of them that are actually purchasing sustainable products. So it kind of gives us that projected field that it looks like, this is going to continue to dramatically be an area of importance.
Great. Sure, you want to take over the next section?
Absolutely. So I know, that everyone always wants to know, okay, is there a business case? Where do we play? What are the claims? And so this section, we want to talk a little bit about, what are the claims that are resonating the most with the consumers? And so if you flip to the next slide, the reality is there was no claim, no specific claim that we can say, here's the silver bullet that you can really, capture the consumer and really drive. But what we found was the products that had multiple claims across multiple pillars, we tended to find that they actually performed better. And so again, the multiple pillars, I'm talking about those 6 ESG classifications that we shared with you earlier. In nearly 80% of the categories, there was a positive, correlation between the growth rate and the number of claims that were being made. And the, products that were making multiple claims, they're growing about 2 times as fast as the ones that were not. I do want to be really clear here, though, that we're not suggesting, as Steve said earlier, we're not just suggesting, slap more claims or certifications on your products and you can expect, to get a reward. It really is about authenticity and genuine actions. And we've got to be, serious about greenwashing. And we just, again, in that global research that we just did at NielsenIQ in December, 77% of consumers said they are going to stop buying a brand if it's found guilty of greenwashing. So what we do think that this indicates is that consumers are probably more likely to, as they see multiple claims across a product, they're kind of more likely to perceive that that product correlates with authentic ESG-related behavior on the part of the brand overall. But it's again why we think it's important for you as you're looking at your products to really think about how you play across not just one, not just environmental, but across multiple of those 6 pillars that we shared with you earlier. And on the next slide, we also wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this in terms of, what matters, right? Where can you play? As Jordan said, the nuances are so category specific. We found in some categories, there were claims where it was a huge differentiation opportunity. And in others, there were claims where the claim was a table stakes. It was kind of a requirement and there was no great opportunity. And so there was no, ESG claim that, one claim that outperformed others. But interestingly, we found some of the less common claims were associated with larger effects. And, so what you can see here on this slide is, on the left, we've got these claims that are less prevalent, things like vegan or carbon zero, growing about, 9% more than their faster than their peers that didn't make them. Then you've got in that middle section, claims that are kind of have medium prevalence, things like sustainable packaging or plant-based, where, they're growing about 5%, differential over their peers. And then there are claims that are really prevalent across the board, like environmentally sustainable. Now, those you can see here have the smallest growth differential, but I frankly want to call it that they still actually had a growth differential. So even those commonplace claims can be differentiating. Now, on the last slide here, we, as Vineet said, this research really, we spent the majority of the effort here really understanding the sales data and, diving in, looking across categories, looking across claims, looking across those pillars. But we also did look at the consumer. And so this is a look from a panel perspective at the consumer panel. We're really trying to understand, that kind of who and loyalty component. As I mentioned earlier, we're often asked, hey, can I charge a price premium? And in some cases, there's a yes and there's a no, but the question we think, or kind of the opportunity to really look at from a sustainability standpoint for your brands, is also around loyalty. And you can see here that we found that brands, and this is again at a very high level that we're showing you this here, but brands that had, that were making more sustainable had sales that were tied more to the sustainability claims, enjoyed greater loyalty overall. And so again, there's that positive association. And when we're looking at loyalty here, what we were looking at was the percent of repeat purchases, 3 times or more. And so again, we just think that this gives that perspective that there is an opportunity to look at where you're playing from a sustainability standpoint and really understand what it means to the consumer. I actually just got my hands on some new research from NielsenIQ last week, where we look a lot on the consumer hierarchy of wellness and where things like their personal health versus the health of others versus the health of the planet falls. And the research that I saw last week is showing that we actually have even seen a jump in an increase of where consumers are placing the importance of social responsibility and the responsibility that we all have to the planet. So I think that this is, continuing. Vineet and Jordan and Steve and I have said this is really chapter 1 of work that we want to do, and there's so much more opportunity to look into the consumer, who they are, how do we support them and help them from a brand and retailer perspective. And with that, Jordan, I'd love to kind of say, where do we go from here?
Maybe I'll get us started on this page, and then Jordan, Sherry, I'm sure you guys may have thoughts too. If you click to the last page, so we attempted to say, as you look across all of this, various categories and the analysis we've done, what do we take from it? Sherry, you did a nice job of saying there is no silver bullet, right? So the answer is not do this one thing in all of your products and success will follow. But we did think that these 5 things were interesting insights to leave you with as you reflect on what we've shared. The first one says, first and foremost, focus on your ESG strategy. What are the things you as a company are committed to that will drive the most impact for the environmental or labor practices that you're committed to? And then invest in the claims and the promotion of those to consumers, right? So it's not about the claim for the claim's sake. It's about doing things that are driving the most ESG benefit as part of your strategy, and then celebrating and claiming those in the products you sell to your consumers. So it's really that link between strategy and product. And if there's a second point that's sort of implied in this one, again, because there's no silver bullet, our belief is it's not about taking, a flagship brand or one small slice of your product portfolio and focusing it, right? There is opportunity across a broad set of products and price points in types of brands. So that would be point number 1, is the portfolio play to reinforce the good that you're doing through ESG strategy overall. Point number 2, we didn't touch on this one quite as directly. We did talk about different price points, different brand size tiers. What we also saw is, you could imagine for most CPG companies, there's a natural cycle of products being introduced, scaling, maturing, and declining. What we saw was sustainability claims had benefit both for new innovation, as you might expect, new product introduction, but also in supporting brands that were more mature. In some cases, even as brands that were more mature were declining, those that had sustainable claims were declining less rapidly than those that didn't, right? So it helps out throughout the product life cycle. And so as you think about investment, taking that broad purview. Number 3 is, Jordan shared the bubble chart with us, and in the context of this overall conversation, we didn't have a chance to dive into category specifics, but to do this right, you need to dive into category specifics, right? You can imagine cereal is going to perform very different than dairy, very different than carbonated beverage. And so understanding the dynamics specific to your category and to your brand is of utmost importance. There will be more information in the report that we're releasing on that, and then certainly happy to have individual conversations specific to your context. Fourth is the notion, Sherry, you were touching on this at the end, right, is where it fits with your ESG strategy and the impact you're having. More claims, multiple claims, right, tend to perform better, right? So it's not just an issue of get a claim out on everything, right? There is real value in doubling down and expanding on those claims across the various pillars where your products have delivered benefit against multiple pillars. And then finally, in particular, in an economy that's got some uncertainty ahead, inflation that while it's coming back into check continues to be high. It's always the balance between designing for sustainability and designing for cost. Most companies at this point will have a pretty robust design for cost or product engineering capability. We would encourage you to have sustainability as an equal part of that capability. So design products both for sustainable attributes that you're delivering and also for the cost of delivering those. Sometimes that means cost engineering out things that aren't sustainable or don't resonate with the customer, but thinking of those as kind of one and the same. So your sustainability, it comes in from the design right up front of the product and the way it's presented. So that was our attempt. I'll pause in case Sherry or Jordan have additional commentary, but that was our attempt at 5 things that we thought were important implications, at least at the cross-category level, to take away.
You did a great job, Steve.
Great. In that case, maybe we'll close then with this page that says we hope this is the start of the conversation and not the end of it. So we would, hopefully you can tell through the dialogue, we're quite excited about the research and the topic in general, as I know that you are by the fact that you've joined us for this session. So we would welcome the opportunity to continue the conversation. The materials from this presentation and the recording, as well as the link to the publication and the article when it comes out, will be shared with the group here today. And so we thank you for spending your time with us.
Yes, thank you, Jordan, Steve, and Sherry, for this great presentation. I think we're all at the edge of our seats to see what is in this report in more detail and the breakout that you said. I certainly want to make sure that we give a huge thanks to McKinsey and Company for their continued partnership with the Consumer Brands Association. We truly appreciate it. And as it was said, for those of you part of our live recording, we're going to share the link to the report along with that contact information that was on the screen with you next week. And if you've tuned into this recording, please reach out and contact those individuals on that last screen there. Consumer Brands has several other industry insight sessions scheduled in the coming weeks. Please visit our events and education page. A link is in the chat to view these sessions and register. Thank you all so much, those who are participating. Thank you to the speakers and McKinsey and Company. We'll all see you again soon. Bye.